Recording is on.
Okay, hello. Today is the meeting number 60 of the Desiderata Extinctionati, and it's the 27th of June. So the topics today are open, and Gary, we will have our...
Okay. Okay.
Well, any questions or anybody got anything from the last meeting? Which, by the way, is private, but send me an email if you want to see it, anybody.
The last meeting was with Spencer McCall, really, wasn't it?
Ah, yes.
Okay, the one before we've got to talk about him, but the one before.
The one before was private.
Hugh, I'm not sure what happens next. Are you going to get in contact with Faulty next? Or what happens?
Yeah, if everybody reviews that document and it's okay, then I'll send them an email and just say, here it is, what you asked for. And then let's have another meeting, I think.
Could we talk about the review?
Okay, so you haven't had any contact with him since the last time we spoke?
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought I just had one action item, and that was to, do some examples and stuff. So hopefully
Gary, you've read the document? I've read it today, and I don't know if you have read it through Gary and any other body online. That Tom, I think.
Yeah.
Mike is not here, so we have to wait for Mike, you see.
Yeah. I sent you a couple of small things. So he's got the corrections that I was interested in. So basically, Hugh, you haven't. I thought that you seemed to be terribly busy. I thought you were actually in contact with him, but you haven't been in contact with him since we spoke. And
no, I've just been writing that document. So.
Yeah. No, you were so quiet. I thought, oh my God, I was assuming that you'd contacted him again, and the two of you were very busy, but I can see now that you were writing the document.
Yeah, no, I was just. Okay. I mean, there's like, I don't know, 21 and 22 pages. So,
and you've edited the video of Spencer McCall. You took out the piece that he didn't want to have on.
Yeah, Mike did. I checked that.
Oh, go on. Yeah. You mean?
No, because he didn't.
So can I send you a private message?
Well, there was he accidentally doxed one or two people, and so we had to cut it out.
Yeah.
By the way, what he doxed was this interview with Tucker Carlson and him, and so I couldn't find the Tucker Carlson interviews. If anybody finds it, then just stick it up there, because basically they were doing a prank on Tucker Carlson. Apparently it worked, but I couldn't find it. So
okay. Yeah. Well, I do. What do you want to do? Talk. There's probably not much to say about Faulty then. If you've just got to send your document.
Yeah, send it
and
try to get
we'll
another
talk
meeting.
about, yeah. So we'll deal with that again when he gets back to you, I guess. Yeah.
Yep.
I was intrigued because in the McCall discussion, it got down to a certain point where we are now. You know, we're talking about you know, Jeff Hull was financing the Jejune Institute and all this kind of thing. No, not the Latitude was the one that cost him a heap of
No,
money,
you both.
apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he did the whole
yeah,
lot. Yeah, he's
yeah,
the guy behind the scenes
yeah.
and all that.
So, what's the story of Jeff Hull? I mean, I don't actually know anything about him. Is it worthwhile
So
talking about him for a minute?
he's actually, well, they call him a trust fund kid, but if you call him a trust fund kid, he gets very upset.
Oh, okay.
He made his money from his dad was an algorithmic trader, had an algorithmic trading company, and he sold it for about 500 million.
Oh, I
But
see.
I think
Right. Yeah.
Jeff Hull was working at the company and had stock in the company, so he says that's where his money comes
Mm.
from. But yeah, um, I think there's money from Seagram somewhere. From maybe I'm mixing him with something, but I think there's originally money from the Seagrams family. But anyway, he's independently wealthy, and so this is kind of his passion project, doing these things.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, he's cagey. You can see in interviews that he will fess up to as much as the interviewer, presses him on. But if the
I
interviewer is just, like, oh, nice little art project, then he goes, nice little art. But if you go a little bit deeper, you can see basically it's what Spencer McCraw said. He said that Jeff Hull just says, what's behind the curtain? He says, another curtain. It's just deeper and deeper. But he's doing, esoteric cults, social change.
in
He's on the
the
same trip we
in
are.
the
Yeah.
interview that he gave in the middle of the documentary, The Institute, it was done in 2012, I think. He mentioned somewhere around the interview, just I think it's like a slip of the tongue, but he says when I was ill or when I was sick, and I don't know, I think he had an interruption for health reasons. I just
Yeah,
wanted to put that on
I
the
think
picture
so. That's right.
because that could be
Yeah.
also a reason why he's very recluse. We don't know everything about private background, but there could be something else. I picked it up twice. I played it back again, and he mentioned to mention it on a big documentary like that was going to be public. It might mean a lot to him. I don't know. It might be in the past because that was done 9 years ago. So it's it might be just not relevant. I don't
I
know.
might be making up stuff, but I think he might have survived cancer.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, because he had
But
no hair and he mentioned
yeah,
illness and stuff like that, I thought, oh, he's young, and I thought maybe there could have been something like it, like that,
yeah.
taken into consideration.
I think there is something about him, but yeah, I would so love to get a few conversations with Jeff Hull going. But he doesn't do interviews anymore. It would be kind of special to get to him, but I think we can eventually get to him. Um, Geordie Aitken and stuff is also interesting. We've still got an interview with him, hopefully.
Okay.
But they're all on the same trip. Did you look at the stuff in Bright Axiom and the Latitude Society?
I looked at some of the Latitude Society things, but I must say I've got a list of things to watch and links that I haven't explored that will give me work for the next couple of weeks at the rate I'm going. Yeah.
Yes, Spencer McCall was quite forthcoming because what they were playing with the Latitude Society, they were playing with cults. So I wasn't really sure how far we would go down the cult conversation, but amazingly, yeah, we did say, the same thing. I think that there's such a thing as a beneficial cult, and you should use it. So, yeah, the number of threads there would be so nice if we could pull them all together. It would be really, really powerful. I think if we can get the ball rolling, there's a lot of opportunity because there's so many of these things like that. Did you see that store that's in Arizona, in Area 15, which Meow Wolf did?
I watched that video, and the fridge, the cooling fridge that opened,
Yeah.
and you go into that thing. It's fascinating.
So there's a lot of stuff like that all over America. In fact, that thing you posted with the Rosicrucians, yeah, I've been to that place in San Jose. It has all fantastic artifacts and some Egyptian artifacts and stuff in it. But I kind of think everybody on the left thinks the same way. Well, I mean, a certain section thinks the same way. So it's kind of been hijacked by wokeism and all this bullshit. But I think there is a genuine vein to tap there, where I'm convinced if you went to that store, Mega Mart and stuff, and they have a closed-ended ARG experience, and I'm sure they would love to feed into a bigger ARG, and there was a climate movement or something like that, because there's a tremendous force that could be assembled and marshaled for just Team Human. The day is coming when basically people will align for Team Human. And so, yeah, I can see that there's a wealth of opportunity to tap into, just approaching these people and saying, if we just fit it all together, stick it under the umbrella of an ARG, I think everybody will get it. It would be tremendously powerful, mainly because the government doesn't understand it. The government would not be, because one of its great points is that we're really fighting Vogons, and Vogons have zero imagination. They're selfish, egocentric narcissists with zero imagination. So they cannot understand group coordination, collective mind. This group intelligence just baffles them. They're like, they don't work together with anybody. So it looks like magic to them when whole sections of the population just completely understand each other and move. And it's scary as fuck for them. They're petrified with it because, they have no antidote to it. It seems they can't even define it. So if you think of like Priti Patel and nutcases like her, she just wants to do policing. And so, she's thinking like a Vogan, she's a bureaucrat, and so she just wants draconian powers to crush anybody on the street. And so, if traditional activism is refined and it becomes fluid and water, and basically they'll be petrified because they won't even be able to define what a protest is. But the way it is now is the left is kind of also bureaucratically minded and stuck in the mud and unimaginative. So it's like, oh, we're going to fight climate change. How? Same old way that hasn't worked for 50 fucking years. You're going to sit in a road. Why does everything go to fucking glue your hand on a fucking door or sit in a road? Banner drops don't do fuck all. But then, we're going to act. Do the same old shit for the thousandth time and it's going nowhere. And it's like, yeah, so they kind of in that spot too. And if they develop the imagination, I mean, look what they did in Hong Kong. They started to say, we must be like those guys in Hong Kong. They weren't an iota like the guys in Hong Kong. Didn't do anything. Be water, like nothing. They did a few micro protests and they did a few flash mobs and stuff, but they didn't even start down there. And now they're going to have to.
Hugh, I was going to just, what's your impression of Faulty's? The first thing he's going to have to do is deal with his people who are closest to him. And I mean, have you got any perspective on that's going to be his first battle? I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can sell it to him, he's got to sell it to them. And like, what's your impression about that?
Yeah. See, while I was writing that document, then I had a lot of time to think about this, and my thinking is that he's probably. I'll share my private thoughts with you here. My thinking is that he knows none of this shit is working, and there needs to be a radical change. He often has expressed frustration that the left is all, you start a climate movement, and before you know it, everybody's got their, pet fucking animal rebellion and social justice and the global south. It just degenerates into horseshit in a matter of seconds. So he keeps on saying, we've got to shelve that stuff and just focus, which the left cannot do. So I think I hope the bait that he takes is that an ARG takes the thinking away. So you don't do any of those decision circles and, people's assemblies and citizens. Well, I think he's still in love with citizens' assemblies, but to try and come up with an action out of a people's assembly is you're going to get the lowest common denominator, some bullshit out of a committee. It's not imaginative. I mean, the police are more imaginative than you can come out with a collective decision from the people's assembly on the left. So I hope that he will see that it's a way where you just cut through the bullshit. Because those democratic things, just ditch all this liberal democratic bullshit. It's like we're in a fucking war. You cannot fight this by going, right, all you soldiers huddle up here, kind of around me, take a knee, and we're going to figure out how to beat Hitler. What are the suggestions? It's like, it's never going to work, dudes. You need to have a hierarchy. You need to have somebody doing the thinking, and you basically... For most brilliant battle plans, it takes a long time to figure them out. And that's their strength. Because if any battle plan relies on secrecy as an element for its success, it's doomed before it's even started. So what makes a successful battle plan is the guys don't see it or they don't believe it. So you use the enemy's own prejudice and stuff so that they can. You must be able to share your battle plan with the enemy, and they wouldn't go meh and dismiss it. That's its strength, and then in that meh is their defeat. So you don't need to have these decision forums in that, but what you do need is something like the Battle of Trafalgar, or in general, in these battles where people win and make dramatic victories, the famous victories of personalities like, Napoleon and Nelson and stuff like that. If you look at Nelson in the Battle of Trafalgar, he said they all knew what was going to happen. What happened normally was ships of the line would form up in two ranks like this, and then the attacking force would come alongside and make two more lines, and then they would come and do broadsides against each other while going along in parallel like this. And it would basically come down to who can load the fastest and who had the most firepower. And so on the day of Trafalgar, then Nelson said, look, we're just going to change the rules. Every single naval exercise and battle and all the training they've done, you do the same old shit where you come alongside and blast each other to pieces. He says, look, let's do this. We'll come like this, but instead of turning like they expect, you just carry on through their lines and break them in half. And then basically think, you've got two ships, each side can blast the ship. They've got no guns, stern and bow, so you can splinter them and stuff. And it was like, as soon as he said it, every one of his admirals went, fucking genius. And then it's kind of stupid. It's like, why didn't somebody else do this before? And so that's, that's what won the day. The French were waiting for the English to turn, and they're waiting, and he never turned. When he never turned, it fucking freaked them out. And so, but you would never come out with that plan out of the committee. In fact, if you present most brilliant plans to a committee, it'll divide the room 50-50. Half the guys would say, no, it'll never work. What they're really saying is, no, that wasn't what I was taught, and it basically it's filled with uncertainty, and I'm scared. So you'll never get genius out of a collective. You just got to get over that shit. And then so I think Faulty realizes that. He's dropped a lot of hints. And I'm hoping the bait he takes is thinking, hang on a minute. There are few guys behind the curtain directing this. All the guys, the players, they don't even know what the fuck's going on. They're just having a good time running around like sheep. They're virtually automaton. So, yes.
What's the? Can I ask a stupid question here? You mentioned a couple of times somewhere, I think, the wisdom of the crowd or something like that, which I didn't have time to. I haven't read up on that. Can you just explain briefly the difference between that and this being tied up with the mediocrity of committee decisions?
Yeah, so it's basically self-selecting. So the intelligence of the crowd is self-selecting. You see, a group or an assembly, like a people's assembly, is automatically a license to be stupid. A license to be stupid, lazy, and egotistical, and people are. Now, in the ARG format, with a gameplay like that, where people are participating in something like a dance, but they're very aware that they're not getting it, that there's something going on, and some people get it, and they're following on. It's like improv or something like that. It's like, so I'll give you an example. When I first came to London in my early 20s, then I was a hick straight, from South Africa, straight off the turnip truck. And so all the guys that I'd hang out with in pubs and stuff were English. I made a point to hang out with English people because I wanted to stay in London, and I knew if you hang out with Australians, Zimbabweans, and South Africans, they all homesick and they all go home. So I didn't want to go back to South Africa. So I made a point of avoiding them and then hanging out with English people. Because I was new and off the turnip truck, the English people, intellectuals, spend too much time in pubs. And so I was the sport. So they would talk over my head and stuff, and I didn't understand the culture, and they would kind of bait me and, rattle my cage to see if they could get a rise out of me. And they had tremendous sport at my expense. But you see, I gradually clued in to what they were doing, and then finally got on their wavelength. But they were being a meta layer over the conversation, basically tossing me intellectually from one to the other, just having a joke at my expense. And so as soon as I realized that, then basically I instantly got smarter, because I realized, okay, this is an interesting game. And then as soon as I started playing the game, then I got better at it than they were. And so it was, but you see, it's kind of like that. You realize there's a whole lot of shit in like the ARG format. You realize there's a whole lot of shit going over your head. You actually try to figure out what's going on, how, and you're struggling to try and catch up. In catching up, smarter people will get it sooner, and the dumbasses will always be lagging. They'll always be kind of, tagging along. So what it means is, when people get it at that collective layer and tune in, it's kind of like Timothy Leary when he says tune in, turn off and drop out, is saying that tuning in means they get it. They finally get it. Oh, we're not doing the wokeism and the bullshit anymore and stuff. And then they start to realize there's another game afoot. And as it goes, you get into a dialogue with the state. So none of this battlefield, one of the serious problems with the left is they think it's a static battlefield. They think that the 5 to 10 years that we have to change the world, that's all we got left. Little window, 5 to 10 years. They think it's always going to be, 2019. They think it's going to be pre-COVID. We're going to be privileged. It's all going to be normal. No, they're going to be fucking, the 4 horsemen are coming. You've got to plan an activist strategy to say, we're very likely to be at war. Go and do a banner drop when we're at fucking war. That's an insurrection. You can be shot for that, you ass. So you've got to think like, how do we plan a grand strategy in a time of a Cold War or a hot war? Okay, the other 4 horsemen, we already had a pandemic. The pandemic's not gone. You can't go and like, oh, we took a year off as a sabbatical because there was a pandemic. No, That's your best opportunity for the last 200 years, and you just flubbed it. And then basically, there's famine. There's an economic collapse. Seriously, I don't think anybody's going to give a rat's ass about wokeism or climate change when there's fucking economic collapse, right? Go and have a look in the Weimar Republic. Go and have a look in Argentina recently and say, oh, were these guys doing activism with banner drops? No, they were trying to fucking survive. So you got to plan all of this in. But nobody's doing it. Everybody's acting like it's all about me, and I'm a privileged fucking little liberal, and basically my secure little life and my place in the plantation house is secure forever. And yes, we also need to address climate change. It's like, it's not realistic, dudes. So then the ARG format then, so no, where I was going with that was okay, when you start out down a path of rebellion, the other big blind spot that the left has is they think, a Russian, a push, and the land is ours, like Morrissey. It's like, no. Even, I think, Faulty thinks that basically you just have this big thing, and then you have a storm stage where then you take over the government. So you do satyagraha, and then suddenly, woof, and you take it. It's like, no, it's never going to be like that. It's a dance, and it might be a long dance. So it's a dance with the state. So you have like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And basically, it's a struggle. It's like a scrum in rugby. The reason why they teach rugby is because they're teaching you how to do battle. And so a scrum moves forwards and backwards, and it's a thing. And then eventually they get a little break, and the ball comes out down the line, and the fly half. Then they can do something creative, But that thing, that's the idea of a battle that moves backwards and forwards and stuff, is like, that's what it is. So you have to think in those terms. You're not going to get what you want in a CEE bill or some big victory and then you can go home. You will never really go home. You'll basically, the way we're going, we're all dead at the time we go home. So you got to think in terms of a long played out dance with the state. And so the state is getting smarter too. So the state does things like censorship, and then, at the stage we're in the stage where South Africa was doing COINTELPRO and propaganda, kind of info wars. So at that stage, they're putting out bullshit information. All the establishment and liberals and stuff, they don't believe in conspiracy theories. You have to be in, but then eventually you get drafted into the military. You suddenly get a quick education on all the conspiracies are actually true, and then and then pretty soon the population gets smart and realize, we're actually in the middle of a war, even though they're not telling us. And so then the public starts to read the propaganda. So you can tell very quickly what the propaganda is saying, because you understand all the techniques quickly. They underreport stuff. If they say, hey, look at this over there, then you look at what's over there, because you read the newspaper and you think, why are they suddenly telling you all this thing and making a big deal out of it? And you say, it must be distracting you from whatever's, go to page 3. Ah, there it is. Like, insurgents coming over the border and the things like, got it. So the public smartens up and they start to learn how to read the government's bullshit. Then it goes into a new level where the government knows that you double gas in them. So then they start a bluff on the bluff. So then basically, they put a thing, they really tell you the real horror in the news. And then everybody goes, well, can't really be that bad because the government would never tell us. And it's like, haha. But it is that bad. They want you to think that. So you get into this game and it goes along. So the same happens with tactics with the rebellion. As the rebellion gets more and more radical, then the government too starts to respond, and they start to feel each other out, and the dance goes back and forward. So I expect that this is going to be a long old dance, because what I think, my guess is they're going to use geoengineering to stave off climate change. At the expense of the planet, every day they do geoengineering is digging a bigger hole for us to die in. And they can, with geoengineering, they can bring it down to, you know, the climate by 1 degree. They can ramp up oil and stuff and start to try and address the economy that way. You know, everything will be going to shit. The ocean will be acidifying. You're getting more and more ghastly headlines, and it's getting more and more dystopian as they do it. But they will be able to carry it on and drag out our agony for a long time. So you must assume that in the 5 to 10 years, we might switch into a path which, you know, there's 50 years, 100 years of hell, a dystopia with geoengineering and stuff like that. You mute?
Could I go back to the question that Gary asked you about the difference between the shit of committee decision and the wisdom of the crowd? Because something came to my mind there about grasping what you call the egregore that's out there, without being in the realm of control, without being in the realm of decision, you know. And I think that where we were earlier about talking about Faulty and his tactics to sell this to the people that are around him, I think that if we can manage to get him on that level and with people around him who can grasp that too, I think we might want to address some of his entourage too, because it's certainly something happening there that is very good. And I'm not going to talk about his movement, but you know, it's just I think it's not enough maybe to just reach out to him.
No, one step at a time. So
Yeah.
I think basically, if you see, he's the key. So it's kind of like he's the veto, right? So if he vetoes it, you can't go anywhere, no matter how many other people you convince. So you just got to concentrate on who has the veto decision, and it's him. So it doesn't help to get more allies. In fact, you're wasting resources by, you know, not focusing.
Can you grasp the absurdity of this kind of thing that we've all been, probably everybody here has been in committees decisions where you have this board and people write things, and then you start and this kind of thinking that is unproductive and leads to, as you said, a sort of.
He's well aware of it. I think it's the bane of his life. But you see, I think it's generally people understand it. It's just they have no alternative, so they won't break away from it. So they won't break the habit until they have a better alternative. And without any, then they're just stuck in this rut. So hopefully this is the better alternative. So yeah, maybe you misunderstood where I was going with the propaganda. I wasn't going off the topic of the collective mind. What I'm saying is the collective mind evolves to, like, you start to understand propaganda, you start to understand the government's moves and stuff. Now, some people understand that better than others. But you see, everybody's at some layer. You see, some part of the population in South Africa, they were thinking, you know, this country's going to be white for the next 1,000 years. You know, it's like bang the table. And then other people would be like, yeah, we've got about 10 years and we're probably going to have a Rwanda-style genocide. And then, you know, the various people that get the truth. So it's very like climate change. Some people think it's all, you know, solar panels and wind farms, and, you know, and then they go through those stages of, you know, grief, really, where they realize, okay, that's not going to work, and they abandon, and then they say, well, maybe this and maybe that, and eventually they get to be doomers and say, you know, we really are fucked. But you see, the guys that are, you know, really get it. So the collective mind, the intelligence of the collective mind, you see it's going through a big gradient filter, and the guys at the top of the filter get it. Those are the guys that are ultimate philosophers, because then they're saying, like, you know, this is the battle of Thermopylae. We are the 300 and we're doomed. We're just doing, you know, virtue ethics or right action. We you know, you just say we're doomed. You just go down doing the right thing, which is to fight. And so those are the guys that get it the most. And then that becomes, you see, now think of all the other think of the opposition. The opposition, like the government. The government is thinking, no, we're going to manage this. We're going to use solar engineering, and we're going to put this hand up this ass, and we're going to tap dance here. We're going to stand on this, higher wire, and we're going to basically be chewing gum, and basically we'll fix the climate crisis at the same time. Like, no, you're going to fuck it up royally, like everything you fucking touch. But they don't get that. So they also have a collective mind that is an opposition, but it's a Vogon mind. It's a mechanical mind. It's rationalist. It's very step procedural, unimaginative. So, we have to use all our creativity to defeat that. And probably the only reward is a nice hospice. It's worthwhile doing. What else do you do? So everybody gets it in a rank. So the same applies to this ARG. If you look at the document, it's pitched kind of less than faulty. Faulty is real doomer, but it's pitched one step below doom. It's kind of pitched. I did pitch it thinking he would actually shop it around to other people, and then I thought that they're very likely to not have such an holistic viewpoint. So then it's kind of left the door open to say, yeah, we can fix the climate crisis. Meanwhile, I don't think I or Faulty think that we're ever going to fix the climate crisis.
Have we had that conversation with Faulty really the last time? Not really, because you were doing sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know, does he snuff opium or not at all?
No, he said many times that like the scenario we're heading for is like worse than bad.
Yeah.
That's as close as he comes. Did you want to say something, Tom? I thought you. Wait, you're muted. Still muted.
You need to at the bottom of the screen, you might have a little thing with the microphone, camera and microphone.
Still can't hear you.
You must have it on your phone.
Yeah, for some reason, he's muting and unmuting there on the phone. I'm not really sure. Oh well. Anyway,
it's not a. I just hear everybody's dropping in and out.
Yeah, I feel quite good about that side of things because we have a lot in common. Like we have the same thing about virtue ethic, and you don't think in terms of utilitarian. So yeah, we think along the same lines of in terms of doomerism. Oh, hi Tom.
Hi, is that working? Ah, yes.
Yeah, it's working now. It's working.
Happened. Weird. I was pressing the on/off. Sorry. Yeah, just quickly. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read your document you've done, but yeah, I definitely think the route in. Just thinking in terms of that team human, that is a winner. I love that, and I was just thinking in terms of coming in not so much from the climate crisis in respect of the ARG, but when you think like when you were saying about how the state says one thing and you can tell they're lying and they're censoring everything now. It's like with that protest yesterday in London, it was the biggest ever, the anti-lockdown protest. And again, obviously they're just lying about the numbers on every single one. But the cool thing is, I don't think Roger always talks about targeting the young people, but I actually think that there's quite a lot of normies now who are like looking at all of this great reset stuff, like normal, like quite clever, articulate people, journalists, people in finance, all sorts of people are going on those marches now, and they're going, hang on a minute, this is looking dark. Like they're getting it from that respect, in terms of that there's obviously an agenda, and they're using this crisis to further lots of rather not Rally, but very dark agendas. So I think that there's a route in there with the ARG to appeal to all those people. I don't know. But...
Yeah, I think so. Definitely skepticism of the system, but
it's
really the game changer is geoengineering, because I think geoengineering is it, because geoengineering really does separate the sheep from the goats. Because you can be, techno-optimist and, think the Industrial Revolution is cool and, civilization has its problems, but, we can make it green and sustainable and do regenerative society. Well, that bullshit goes out the window when geoengineering is on the table. Geoengineering really says, are we transhumanists that are going to take control of this entire planet down to the weather? And do you think we're up to it? Or are you smart enough to realize that is utter hubris? But if it's utter hubris, we have to stop the project. We have to stop the civilization project. So it's a real fork in the road. And I think basically we should drive it home for all it's worth.
Yeah, I mean that, but how... I mean, I get the geoengineering, but I kind of still, I don't know, maybe it's just because I've got my head in all the COVID and lockdown bollocks, and that everyone is like all optimistic at the minute and thinks that everything's solved. And I kind of think the geoengineering thing is coming. Obviously, it's coming pretty quick, but I kind of feel like to get to everyone to understand that side of it first, you need to break them down. Well, hopefully it will be done for us because of the financial crisis and maybe because of how the pandemic will pan out this winter, autumn, when they finally lose hope that, oh shit, that first vaccine, no, that's not the end of it. That's actually, and then you can, attack with all the other problems. I don't know.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's right. We must think in terms of a second wave in autumn. So already it's looking certainty, because Israel is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, and their numbers are starting to pick up with the Delta variant. So it's pretty obvious that the vaccines don't work.
There's more and more indicators everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just Israel was one of the ideal situation where they had that enormous percentage of the population vaccinated, and it's just and they were the earliest too.
Australia is going down to lockdown. New South Wales, Melbourne, and stuff, and it's they were all laughing. Like my sister in Perth, and that said, like, pandemic's other people's problem, didn't even come here. It's like, not so much now.
I mean, here in UK.
Yeah, I've noticed that here. It's.
Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, while we're on topic, sorry, Tom, is that, like really looking at the virus in Australia, it's just a problem of Melbourne and Sydney, basically. Everybody else, and they did have it in Brisbane, but just the largest metropolitan areas, and it's just not an issue anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's going to change, though. That Delta variant is kind of spooky.
Yeah, they talked about mutant strain the other day, like another variation from the Indian variant or something.
Yeah, Delta Plus. Delta. They don't even want to go to Echo. They're just like...
It might be time to bring back Kevin for a conversation next week if we have some questions on those new viruses and those variants and the evolution of things. I know he's very focused at the moment on his anti-vaccine and things like that, and all sorts of other topics that I still sometimes look at on his server just to keep in touch. But maybe it could be an opportunity, because it's always at the background, like this pandemic, to have another. Do you agree with that as a group?
Yeah, I look at his stuff occasionally. It's just they're a little bit off in the weeds there, like for the stuff we're doing is about.
If you have some questions, he's a good guy to answer those.
I want to know about the prions and stuff and news on that side.
Yeah, I know. It's that
Yeah.
prion thing is his line of work, you see. That's his research.
Yeah.
And that's what he likes to talk
Yeah,
about.
I'm wondering, has anybody else listened to any of those talks by Gert Vandenbosch?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering whether what's the feeling about him, talking to him, because he was talking about the development of new variants, to a greater degree than any of the others have. So I don't know what the thoughts are there.
Well, that would be somebody to reach out to. That's a very good idea. It's just that he's very alone in his sphere. He's been completely isolated, and I don't know if we're not just going to end up with just hearing him with his theory. And he's a vet who's done a lot of research in infections, and
I think even though there's probably
Sorry,
You're
it's
not-
very dense. He's really, I mean, incredibly learned guy. But yeah, it's heavy. I listened to, I think it was Chris Martinson on Peak Prosperity. He did an interview with him, but I think he just basically broke the interview down and then did his own presentation of his theory, because it is quite, the guy is not native English speaker, and it's just very dense in terms of understanding all of the elements of it. But he is really, really, really interesting guy. There's a lot to take in there.
yeah.
Talking PhD level virology, it's quite complex to understand.
To contribute
did
more
do one.
to contribute more to this going
He
on,
did do one video.
going on into the weeds of the COVID confusion. There's another British scientist, Dr. Michael Yeadon, and his theory is that the variants are not going to be very, very different from whatever actually the original SARS-CoV-2 virus is. So he's kind of thinking that as long as that it's not going to be totally different. But of course, that's the current thing. We don't know how it will evolve in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can form a chimera. So it can meet some horrid virus and form a chimera that might be very, very bad indeed.
I've also gone into the rabbit.
If I can just mention that.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to add about Vandenbosch from what Tom said. He has done it. I think one of his most recent video that I saw just a couple of weeks ago, where he did actually present it in plain English. He sort of got. I think he might have realised the problem that you were describing. It was extremely dense, and you had to really focus on it.
Yeah, best interview with Brett Weinstein, because Brett was saying, okay, let's just lay it out in layman's terms and just to, make it very simple.
No, he did another one by himself. It wasn't an interview. He just came on by himself and he just spoke, and it was actually very good. It was just really laid out very clearly and simply, and the kind of thing that you could follow without sort of getting your brain stressed out too much. So
would you?
I'll try and find it for you. Yeah.
Because then there's a lot of people who talk. There's so many people between that guy that you mentioned, that English guy Michael Hayden, and of course all sorts of others. So interviewing one guy is going to be, they're all very entrenched in their positions and their research. It's like when you talk to Kevin too. So the best thing is to maybe find a panel of people who could talk and debate. Maybe no, but if we want to do something on COVID, we could work on a serious panel of people who might be tearing at each other, but at least we might get something out of the thing, because I feel like in
the other one that was interesting was
on
English
for 3 seconds, right? take
No,
down from
not
YouTube
English.
to 3 seconds in.
Sukarak Bhakti as well, German guy.
Yeah,
He
Bhakti. Yeah,
won
yeah,
about,
that's right. The
Yes,
German
he's
guy.
another
Yeah.
one. There are so
but
many of
Yeah.
them.
yeah, you kind of got Sukarak Bhakti who's saying why is it needed? COVID isn't as bad as it was billed. Then you've got Gert van den Bosch, who's, you know, he is a vaccinologist. He believes in vaccines, but he is arguing that in this instance, vaccination is very, very bad because you're doing it during a pandemic, so you'll get immune escape. Then Mike Yeadon was the former Pfizer CEO, and he's kind of gone down the conspiracy theorist thinking it is basically a depopulation program because he can't see, again, he doesn't believe that COVID was ever as bad as they've said, and that he just can't add it up in his head. He's like, well, it must be some really nefarious project to basically, yeah.
yes,
So
Tom,
there's
I
a
agree with
very
that.
emphasis of those three scientists there, but they're all, yeah, experts in their own field. But
I agree with what you
Obviously,
said, Tom, on Gert. I agree absolutely. He's very, but don't forget all these guys, all the data they have. When they talk about, they talk about a vaccinotherapy that is totally new. That doesn't work as the other vaccines. So all the data we have from the past, like vaccinating during pandemics, all these sort of things, this is based on traditional vaccines. It's not based on this therapy that is not sterilizing the virus and that is only really there to prevent people from ending up in ICU or having serious disease, really, because it doesn't stop you from getting COVID and it doesn't stop you from transmitting it, as opposed to all the other vaccines that we've heard before. Even the old flu vaccine that you used to do was given every year to people. Normally, people will not get and will not transmit it with that one. But so we're in total limbo, and you have a lot of people emerging like that, of researchers. It reminds me of what Hugh said last year when he was telling us about reading the Journal of the Plague of Daniel Defoe. You know, during these terrible apocalyptic, frightening eras, all sorts of people emerge with their message and their kind of, but we're in the unknown, and even in our days of science, etc., these guys are great. I mean, I'm learning a lot from them, and I'm not diminishing, but you have to be, and who am I, a little tiny little doctor isolated in the countryside to stand up to these guys? But with a bit of common sense, we have to realize that we're in a territory that we're going to hear a lot of things, and we might be wasting our time. You know,
I thought of
listening too much
question.
to this one and that one. That's why Kevin is a bit of an outsider in the way that he is. First, he's a guy on the terrain. He doesn't talk. He's got a lot of data, and he listens to all these guys. That's why I was suggesting him again. First, he's fun to engage with, and second, because he's collected an awful lot of stuff, you know. But these are the guys I have. Don't get me wrong, I have all but admiration for the courage that they have to stand up. But
I was thinking the same thing, actually. I thought, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, because from our point of view, the real value out of, I mean, you can't do anything about the pandemic. So the real value of it is that, as far as I can see, is that it undermines people's belief in the state.
yeah.
Because, you see, before this, they had irrational expectations about, you know, the power of governments and the power of doctors and the power of the United Nations and stuff. And all of that has fallen away. So all these guys come out of the woodwork and everybody's an expert and the government's floundering, and, you know, turns out all the, you know, America's favorite Uncle Fauci and everything turns out to be deep in this conspiracy of like bioweapons research. And so the gold in all of this is very hard to maintain a liberal belief in, so and trust in the government. So that's the biggest value of this for us, is we've got a window before everybody forgets and starts trusting the government again, is that now people don't believe shit. They don't believe anything. And so these guys are only good for reinforcing, you know, the fact that nobody knows what the hell's going on. But I think a safe bet is that it'll get worse. So Yeah, the government will look more incompetent, and I think what's happening now is they're screwing up big time, because in the exuberance to get everybody back into a functional economy, they fucked up big time, and that's raised everybody's expectations again, so that when they dashed, people are going to be really, really broken. And I'd say that's our key. So if that happens, we should be prepping for it. We say, like, what do we do when everybody's massively disappointed and angry with the government? And then what imagine that they have, anti-lockdown protests, and say, let's take the UK, and the police and crimes bill has already gone through. The police are going to mop up, it's going to turn bloody, because basically the rubber really meets the road there, because you can't do an old style, protest anymore. So the public, we're talking about, this dance. Well, what Priti Patel has done is a severe overreach in the tango, and so what's going to happen is people are going to have a radical response. When you start putting people under pressure, that kettle's going to be under serious pressure when the police starts flexing their muscles with that bill, and people are really angry because they were betrayed. So you can imagine things like the poll tax riots and against Maggie and stuff. It might look kind of like that in Trafalgar Square, because the police will be trying to enforce their newfound powers and doing outrageous things, and the protests will be angry as all fuck. So I think we should think ahead to that day.
Yeah, because all the small businesses and everything, all these people are really pissed off, because they didn't get the 21st of June was supposed to be Freedom Day. And of course, it was, again, Johnson, Whitty, Valance, they came on TV and they looked ashen-faced, and you could tell they knew they were lying. And people were just like, this is fucking ridiculous, People in who are small business owners, because a lot of people are like, oh well, look, it's just another 4 weeks, but they're like, look, we're still having to do distancing, and you can't have large events, and you can't have weddings, there's so many things you still can't do, particularly if you're if you've spent 15 months, festivals, they're out the window pretty much, and people love all that stuff, and they're just like absolutely at their wits' end. So if it comes to July 19th, and again they say, oh look, Indian variant, we're going to have to carry on with this, people are just going to be at breaking point, and they're probably just not going to stand for it. So hopefully that's the time when they start losing faith, because the problem is, most of the people during this whole thing have run to the state, and they've gone, oh, this is what we need to do. Everybody's been a bit of a zombie, but I think there's a growing crowd of people that are just like waking up and being like, there's something not right here, it stinks.
I think it's a moment of opportunity. I think we should plan for it, expecting, because if it doesn't happen, there'll be some, look, I mean, you can see what's going on, or at least I think I can, and then
can I
yeah, go ahead.
Can I say something? I was just thinking about viewing the virus, because you were the pandemic as an opportunity situation, but I was thinking in terms of the kind of ARGs that you're talking about, that in a way the virus has arisen, and you may or may not want to subscribe to whether it was deliberately done, but it's being co-opted by governments to further authoritarian agendas. But the thing is, you can just game jack the virus game more or less, in terms of what you were just saying, where people are going to get fed up, and then it's going to be up to them. That gives them the opening to seize the particular game, which is currently being used for the control agenda, and turn it back to their own. So you could sort of look at the whole virus situation as being a game that could be subject to game jacking, and look at it from that point of view.
Yes, but I think my gut feel is that it was an accident. So it's kind of an inconvenience on the bigger game. And the bigger game is the one that can be game jacked. So the bigger game is the Great Reset, and there's definitely a financial Great Reset, and I'm increasingly believing that there's a military component to it. So the way they're moving the chess pieces now is you can see they're moving closer and closer. We're thoroughly in Cold War II. But I think they're lining the crosshairs on Iran and stuff. All the chips and stuff, they're trying to get clean chipsets and stuff like that. You can see them moving towards a big war to contain China. And that would be, in about 2024. So I think they're trying to clear the decks for the next operation, is what they seem to be doing. And
that is not clear to a majority of people. And Tom, you state that you're having big protests, for anti-lockdown protests in the UK. I don't really, I don't get it, except that, well, people don't want to be controlled by the state and the state telling them to be in lockdown. But deep down, people know that there's a variant. They know that there's danger. They know all these things. And are they not campaigning for self-imposed measures with what are they asking? Are they asking for the government to lift the lockdown, or are they asking to be in power and to decide themselves in their communities, in their areas, what to do? What is the root of the anti-lockdown? I don't get it.
I think there's a mixture of people there. So you have got, of course, like all these protests, you've got the tin hat foil people, you've got the people that will always go to protest, but there is a growing majority of middle class business owners that are saying enough, like this has gone on too long now. We have the vaccination program, which of course most of these people are following the letter of the mainstream media. And they're saying, we have got probably the second best vaccination program in the world, where other countries in Europe have opened up more, states in America have opened up more. Why are we still and they are starting to go down the rabbit hole in respect of, some of them are, in respect of Great Reset agenda and all of these, the World Economic Forum. So yeah, it's a mix. It's a mess. But yeah, I agree. I'm not saying that I somewhere in the middle, and there's definitely a virus, and I agree with you. It's particularly an accident. But I kind of feel like the vaccination thing is, that's clearly going to end up being a disaster because we've gone and interfered, haven't we? And it's a new therapy, and it's probably going to cause what Van der Bosch has said, but we don't know. I mean, who knows? But I think, we should, that those people would be right for turning, initially just turning their heads to being, against the state and say, look, because clearly that agenda of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, they want to destroy small business. They don't want small business anymore, do they? That is clearly I don't think that's a conspiracy. That's just
but that's a liberal agenda. Those anti-lockdown people are total liberals. They're just having
so you're right. They do. They are clearly they want life to go back to normal. But my point is, I think that's a way in, to get those people on board and say, look, this is what is really going on, and also this, it's also the beginning of a lot of other worse things. So that was just my point.
I know, but I live in a country where people believe totally. The majority of people believe totally in the vaccine, believe totally in what the government is selling, and that economy everywhere. And I know exactly. It's very similar to what's going on in the UK here too. But I'm trying to see how we can hijack these anti-lockdown sentiments, because they could be a great asset, a great strategy for our type of thinking. How do we?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
But I think the best gift we could have is if everybody went into lockdown again. Because in lockdown, then they're online and we can start testing some of these tactics.
I think you're right, yeah. And I mean, there's so many more independent journalists who are like looking at this through that kind of lens. And I think that in some ways they're opening their eyes. A lot of people are being woken up to, just the sort of nefarious nature of the state, and
So we need to do lockdown.
when conspiracy theorists are actually, they seem to be the most sane people now. It's funny, it's just bizarre the world we're living in. But
so Doomers are having a field day because finally everybody realizes that things can go wrong.
So we need to call for lockdown. We need to support any type of people who are calling for lockdown. We need to.
No, but we can't be seen to call for lockdown. You've got to step into the anti-lockdown centers. They're going to impose a lockdown.
Well, how do you call for lockdown? You propagate the numbers, the risks, the failure of the vaccine.
And if it's not for COVID, it will be possibly because we're going to go into like massive financial crisis, and they're going to use lockdowns to put everyone in homes because all the cash points are going to go kaput, and they're going to need time. It'll take probably weeks for them to sort all this shit out when they finally pull the plug on all of that side of it. I mean, again, what's all this UFO business about? I don't know what's going on there. That's
my understanding of the UFOs, it's just a faction of nutcases in the Pentagon. So
is it?
I don't. Basically, I think I've always heard that there's a bunch of guys who are influential enough to get Star Wars going, right, or Space Force, and there's a large group of people in the Pentagon that thinks we're about to have an alien invasion. Personally, I think they're nutcases, but there's certainly weird shit going out there. But it's I don't think it's really.
No, I mean, that's what I kind of thought you would. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But it's another element of fear to make people think, oh, what's going on? Like, they're not.
Well, I think that they're trying to bring it out into the public because now that they have basically Space Force, they need to fund it. So they need their threat. So they'll push it.
Little things of them.
On this topic, I think the obvious things coming down the pike are the cyber war. I really believe in this, Agenda 201 and stuff, and they're practicing for a big,
side of that's coming out.
So basically, I'm a big believer in that heralds exactly the same deal. And so I don't think they're doing that for nothing. In a couple of days, the end of June is quite a big point for Basel III. We're going to see what happens with the bankers' internal war. And the winner of that fight will determine a lot about what happens with gold and silver. But I think by these next 6 months are the prelude to a financial collapse. And we're talking bail-ins and disasters like that. So it's I think there are a lot of spooks in the cupboard, in the financial cupboard. And I think all the zombies are going to start coming out of the banking system.
Yeah, so they had the other thing they had the other day on the UK government website. We're testing emergency siren that can just go off on your Android phone, like randomly. They're doing it in America, and they were testing it in one area of England, and just an emergency siren on your phone that just go off randomly.
No, it's in America. It's been there since the Cold War, but that kind of thing is, it's kind of like a preparation for war. Those kind of things, when they start doing shit like that, we're going to war. But I think we should ignore the COVID because it's kind of obvious, and I don't think we can contribute. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk to these guys because you're just getting involved in the kind of FUD and the fog of war. But I think we should be forward-looking and look at the cyber thing and look at the financial thing because everybody's going to be blindsided by that, and it would be good to be ahead of the game. And we should find our next Kevin in the financial industry and in basically cybersecurity, because there must be guys.
I agree totally. I think I thought because we were talking about COVID there that best person to ask question. But honestly, I think if we have to spend time online and have conversations that advance things and helps us even towards the ARG and its aim, I think we need to leave that aside and concentrate on what you say. I totally agree.
Yeah, so let's look into that. Maybe we should start seeing more about that, the cyber, what that exercise like.
Cyber Polygon. Yeah.
Yeah, Polygon. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe talk to people around. Yeah, there are lots of like shaking in the. You can see the threads in the web are trembling in various places, and yeah, that'd be nice.
It's more like we talked about and watched and read the Bright Green Lies book and movie. It's almost like it would be good to to coin a phrase that's like lies upon lies, like all these lies are getting exposed.
Yeah, but there's so many damn lies. It's just a house of
So many,
lies
yes,
from end to end.
so many
It-
lies, so
House
little
of Lies,
time.
a good title, House of Lies.
yeah,
It reminds me of insects and ticks, though.
Maybe we could speak to
House of
someone
Lies.
like Snowden, see what he thinks about it. I
Jesus,
don't know.
I no, I think it's a little hard to get an
Yeah.
interview with him. He's famous, but
I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone in that vein, like
well,
someone on the
Mike
dynamic.
Maloney, I would always like to talk to him. He's in,
Yeah.
Goldbug.
Yeah.
Alistair McLeod, I think it is. Who's that?
Oh, yes, yeah. He's an interesting guy. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
Chris Martinson blog, there's a spin-off of it called Wealthion, and they've always interviewed luminaries or experts in the finance world. So I think those two people you just mentioned, Lord Hugh, have been interviewed by Adam Taggart. So they're always talking about inflation or the Great Reset and all these financial
But
events.
those guys are kind of like old school, sort of gold buggy, like Austrian economist types. I'm just wondering about someone who's a bit more, avant-garde, a bit more.
the problem is the avant-garde guys are crypto guys, and then they're not.
That Tyler Durden.
Yeah, but well, the guys at Zero Hedge, they are. I mean, they're kind of right-wing libertarians. You can't post anything from Zero Hedge on Reddit. It just gets instantly removed. But the guys and I agree with the guys on Zero Hedge. They do know what's coming. I mean, the inflation is rampant. They pumped so much money into the economy. It's just an extraordinary pool of money. And so, yeah, you're starting to see it, filter into prices and stuff. I think inflation in the States is running at about 12%. So that's gonna cause tears.
Commodities are going up, aren't they? There's a lot of people been pointing at.
Well, the Fed says, the Powell and the Fed is saying, well, nobody's got a job. How can prices go up? They're like, what are you talking about? The price of the stock market, the price of houses, it's like everything is going through. Just the fact they don't measure them doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Monaco 64 was saying he reckons we were in the crack up boom, where it's just starting, like where you had the crack up boom, don't you, before the hyperinflationary event.
Well, they measure GDP as the money circulating after they inflate the money supply. So it's like, of course, there's a recovery when you pump money in, because it's the money sloshing around, but there's no demand, there's no extra demand. Nobody has an extra job to afford all of this shit. It's just sloshing around in all these, asset bubbles and stuff. So yeah, it's only a matter of time before there's a very, very loud bang that's going to be heard around the world. But they intend it. They want it. they need to restructure. They need another Bretton Woods. But in the time between inflating the economy and everybody's going like, yay, economy is getting back post-COVID, which it isn't. It's just being inflated with QE. From there to Venezuela and hyperinflation and people having parallel currencies and community currencies and stuff just to survive, then in that window before then they start cashless society, there's a lot of discontent. So the governments can easily lose power. See, they're really playing with fire, because the only gambit a government really has is safety in the status quo. So if the government itself says it's time for a big revolution, that puts the idea of revolution in play. And then it becomes whose revolution, what revolution, and they quickly lose that control of that narrative. So this is a big time for us. I think we should try and position expecting that to happen. So
yeah. Definitely. Who was that guy in the film? The film about the financial crisis. The guy, I think it was
The Big Short guy?
Big
Michael
Short.
Burry?
Yeah.
Michael
Yeah,
Burry?
that character. Yeah, he's trying to get him. I don't know where he is. Yeah,
Well,
that'd be good.
Well, it might be worth looking at people who've lived through hyperinflation. So people in Venezuela and stuff, economists. I would love to talk to an economist from Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. There's a guy on YouTube who actually he's got a channel and he was talking about this. I'll try and dig it out. And he was coming from personal experience in an Eastern European country after the fall of the Soviet Union. I can't remember. It's quite a new one that came up on my feed. And he was saying, just doing a YouTube tutorial on this is what happens, when it all goes to shit. It was quite good, actually.
That's Dmitry Orlov.
Yeah, it's just
he's a Russian guy who lives in the States now, but he based all his books on going through the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he's written a lot about economics, but also sorts of things. He lives on a boat on the East Coast, and he's
I don't know.
Dmitry
of him. We tried once, didn't we?
Did we try him? I don't know if we did. I don't remember.
I would love to talk to him.
He would be a great guy to contact.
I think Dmitry Orlov, we should try to get all of him.
That would be really good as well, because he's got a really good riff on all of what happened with the French assassins, during the
fight. I can't see it now and again, and I looked at the plans of his boat to live on. It was like funny the way. But yeah, we could try to,
or somebody that knows, an historian that knows about the assassins would be really cool.
Well, he's quite a good. That was pretty.
I think it was Orlov.
Dmitry Orlov.
Orlov, who wrote the 5 Stages of Collapse. That's the book I read, but he's written a lot of other ones. I don't know what he's doing now. At the moment, he's quite silent. He's got a blog. I could fish. I could have a look. I'll have a look, and I'll.
In the Quest is perennial.
Mm. And why is the idea of Snowdown completely outrageous? Why not? You never know.
Yeah,
I don't think he would answer. I mean, I assume he gets thousands of.
But the worst that could happen is that he says no. But we're talking about.
I mean, if you want about, but I just assume guys that are that famous, you can't get hold of them. They will give you a standard form letter to. But they'd ask you who you are and stuff, and I think he only talks to big news organizations and stuff. I don't think he deals with small fry. But yeah, I mean, geez, I'd love to talk to Snowden, but there are others. There's Edward Binney and stuff is also in that realm. But Binney's he does actually believe in the state. So it's kind of Edward Snowden that believes in the state, if you can believe that. But there are lots of guys. Yeah, anybody ex-NSA or something like that would be really good. And the other thing is to talk to people on the inside. There are a lot of guys from the DHS and stuff like that that I've known over years. I don't know if they'll talk publicly, but they might talk anonymously. And I would love people to know, especially liberals, to know what's coming. They don't know what's in the. If you tell them what's in those disaster plans and all the things that the DHS has, they'll raise the hair on the back of your neck. They are really grisly shit, and liberals don't believe it. And so it's, I thought that XR, one of the things that XR should do, said ages ago, they should go to the county level and demand to see the disaster plans, and on the basis that a lot of them have been declassified, and they really you don't want to live under those disaster plans. I mean, stuff in the UK is like they will send someone from the House of Lords. So you'll get some senile guy over the House of Lords in an emergency, and they will send him to your county, and he will have absolute authority. He could pull out a pistol and shoot somebody.
Yeah, there's a really good documentary. It's still on YouTube from BBC Newsnight, and it's called "When the Bomb Falls" or something. Right. It's about if there was Armageddon, like what happens in these local bunkers in each county, like you're talking about. And it is literally just like there'd be one official and then minions, and then he would have to just.
It's nothing any citizen would plan. It comes straight from the evil mind of these worst bureaucrats, and so I thought that it would be so good to actually get people thinking about those, or get whatever plan is declassified from the Cold War and stuff, and get citizens to start discussing it. Because if there's anything that will make them break faith, anything will make a liberal break faith is with the state, is to know how the state treats you when there really isn't.
Sweden has sent their disaster plans to every citizen a few years ago. They have it in there. They've sent them some time when there was some tensions with Russia. Something was happening anyway, but they're in every house now. That's Sweden. But if you can get your disaster plans from your county council in any country or in Europe, in any country, the best thing would not be to discuss it. The best thing would be to have it published in the local press.
Well, that's where I'm going with it. Is surface them, because the first thing people say is we don't want to be managed like that in a disaster. Well, that really challenges the state, because they'd say, like, what do they say? Is like, oh, tell us how you want to be managed in a disaster, and we'll see if we can accommodate you, Hampshire or Kent or something. It's like, they're not going to say that. They're in a very difficult spot, because all of their thing is based on, we keep power and we're going to grind your face into the dirt to stay in power, even if it's nuclear Armageddon. You say, well, actually, we'd like a reprieve, and we'd like to be set free if the government in Whitehall goes down the pan. And so it's basically, they don't want you to think that way or think it. And it breaks the narrative that people, liberals have, is the social contract that, you can, rape my ass every fucking day, tax me to oblivion, not give me any health care, and keep me working like a wage slave. But you protect me, right? And the government goes, yeah. And it's a complete lie. They do nothing. You've seen in a pandemic, they've got no preparedness. Then basically, you see what happens if there's a famine, if there's a war or something. It's like you're out in the cold, and they don't know that. So they say, like, what's the government for? We only have it here for disaster insurance. And you say, like, and you make the disaster 1 million times worse. You say, thank you, Grandma. Now you're an anarchist. So it's basically, there was, it's a very powerful thing, I think, to expose them and show what happens. And I mean, I've seen plans, I've had to implement things because I've done weird things, and especially technology for what they will deploy in a disaster. Especially, I did stuff with mesh networks, assembled mesh networks with radios. So you have these tiny little devices. They were called Zigbee devices, but they're not anymore. And you basically imagine you get these tiny little electronic devices, postage stamp size. They're fully powered. They can power off anything. They can stick to the side of a bridge and get powered from the percussion of the bridge as cars go over them. They're extremely light power. They have tiny little solar cells, can last forever. Basically, you have to imagine them sprinkling these things out over a city out of the back of an aeroplane. There are thousands and thousands of them. They all link up and form a mesh network because they assume the grid in the internet's going to go down. So these are like ad hoc internets. You won't have access to them. Your cell phone will go in the first EMP. And this is the stuff they'll do. But what happens when they use those mesh networks for is the stuff of nightmares. Basically, you have to see what happens when say, like Ebola and stuff breaks out. It's basically, they form an armed quarantine. Say if Ebola broke out in San Francisco, they'd form an armed cordon at various points that are predefined, basically the bridges, okay? And then basically they'd have shoot to kill. They would bring you some water and food to the perimeter, but they just wait until the disease dies out. There's no functional hospital, no electricity. People would be dying of cholera and diphtheria and stuff, and basically typhoid fever because nothing would be working. And they would just contain you there with sandbags and machine guns until basically the disease died out. That's the kind of plans. And there are plenty of things that I told people about. Now they kind of believe me a little bit more, but they really, really do plan to chip you. They really do plan to have a vaccine where you have a choice. You have the vaccine and it has a chip, and the chip certifies that you had the vaccine. Or you go into a quarantine. And the quarantine's in a fucking camp, FEMA camp. FEMA, so you don't realize how devious all these places are. So, for example, FEMA camps are nightmarish places. I'll just give you an idea of how they work. So they have these kind of huts, Nissen huts, prefabricated houses that they will drop in. Right? So they would put them in a big concentration camp, barbed wire fences and stuff like that. But each one of these houses, they're actually made of different types. And the type is designed for how quickly it deteriorates. So they're made out of cornstarch. And so they basically, whoever the FEMA manager, he asked for, like, give me a 3-month house. And then a 6-month house or a year's house. I think it only goes up to a year, after a year. And so they designed for the insects and the rain to break them down. And the reason is so that you can't form a permanent settlement. So you have to be reliant on them for housing. They won't let you get hold of corrugated iron and plastic sheeting like you would in, say, in Africa. I'd prefer to be in Africa in that situation because they wouldn't try and contain you. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and if there's insurrection and stuff, that's what they'll do. They'll take large sections of the population and just put them in a camp like that, and it will be a fucking death camp. I mean, you want to see what happens in a camp like that when typhoid breaks out and stuff. It's just so nightmarish. You can barely believe it. And they have plan after plan, city level, basically county level, state level, and federal level. Each one of them is more and more fucking disastrous. So I just wish people knew what was coming, because everybody believes, oh, this is going to be really bad. But I'm going to, watch it on my widescreen TV with Budweiser in my hand. No, you're fucking not. Basically, people got to smarten up and realize how bad this is going to be. So I think that, I wish that XR and stuff had done more on that to try and say, because, yeah, the best gambit you've got with liberals is to say, they're not going to fulfill their side of the contract that you've staked your life on. And so, yeah.
Now, I have a naive question again. Are in the U.S. are these different levels of government? Do they share with each other the disaster plans, or are the federal bodies keeping that for themselves,
The,
and they will only deploy and roll out and communicate the federal plan once the
yeah,
disaster
so
happens?
it works in layers depending on how, as the disaster extends. So if you imagine like a city, like San Francisco or something like that, then Willie Brown, I can't remember who the mayor is now. So at the mayoral level, then basically Willie Brown can declare a level of emergency, a city level emergency. And there's certain things that he can do according to the Insurrection Act. But depending on how that gets managed, then it would soon fall to the governor of California. And the governor of California is going to work with FEMA. So the federal agency will take over. And then basically they will manage it with the police and emergency services subordinate to that. But hanging in the wings is the National Guard. So and even the regular army, the Kazi Comitatus, how do you say that? Yeah. Kazi Comitatus and stuff like that is and the various things in the Insurrection Act where they can actually deploy. Most Americans think, oh, you're not allowed to deploy the military in a domestic situation in America. Well, not so true. There are plenty of things in the Insurrection Act for when it can be done. But as the situation gets worse and worse, so then it gets taken out of the hands of each authority. So if you imagine in Katrina, in the mayor in New Orleans would have, kind of responsibility for the city police and fire and stuff like that. But if it got to be a bigger emergency, so statewide emergency, the flavor of it would change very quickly. And at some stage, if there are a number of states that are involved in a thing, then it'll go straight to the federal level. And then you're not in a very good position because FEMA and stuff manages disasters with a gun.
Thank you. Think.
Yeah, I was just thinking, something that, that annoys me, the way faulty you're calling him now. He's just so simplistic, and when he tries to appeal to young people, just says, oh, what's going to happen is there's going to be a war, and your wife's going to be raped on the table, or your girlfriend. But that bugs me how he approaches it. Your message is way more powerful. What you're just talking about, I know you've talked about it before. You need some more layers there. Just trying to use this simplistic shock tactic to appeal to young people in his current strategy. It's just bugs me. It was the same. He did the same before. He said you're all heading for annihilation or equivalent of. It's like, Roger, like, sort it out. Like, you need to.
But you see, it pays to be nuanced and try to be accurate about these kind of things, so that people really see it as a possibility. And it's quite easy to do. You can read Rebecca Solnit and you can see what happened in Sarajevo and in Lebanon and stuff. And it's pretty consistent what people do. I mean, people can fuck it up rather badly, but that's generally because they have warlords and governments. And in those situations, they always a proxy in some bigger war like the Cold War. So, it's well worth telling kids about how collapse happens in detail and say, look, if in a place like Britain, it's vulnerable to severe austerity, price hikes, insurrection in the streets. So it looks like the 70s. People will strike. There'll be trash building up on the streets. That'll lead to pandemics and typhoid and stuff like that. So you got to a collapse in Britain will look much like the war, going into the war. There'll be rationing and stuff like that. But I would hate to be in Britain in a collapse because it's going to be managed all the way down the road. I'd rather be in somewhere like Somalia, where where the government collapses early, and then people have options. The best option you have in most countries is when it becomes a community support operation. And then, if you look at something like Puerto Rico and stuff like that, after the Hurricane Maria, the guys realize, at some point, the government is fucked. They're not collecting any tax, they've got no resources, and they can't pay anybody. So it's up to everybody else. Then everybody else starts, all these people start coming out, and guys start wiring up the electrics and stuff, and then you get the volunteerism and stuff. But that only starts when everybody realizes there's no help from the authorities. People will wait, and they will cause themselves untold trouble because they've been conditioned to think that the government's there to help. And it's like, no, it isn't. The government's ability to help you is very, very limited. Go and see something like Katrina, and you'll see it's like they've got one helicopter. It's like you saw that in 9/11. The guys go to the top of the building, of a burning building. You cannot do anything stupider than go to the top of a burning building. But they all thought, well, the government's going to put on helicopters and comes. No, they fucking aren't. So people have an exaggerated idea of the power of the government, and the government encourages it. But the government encourages the idea that they have power because they want to intimidate you, and they want to basically say that they're there to keep you safe. But both of them are a complete lie. After 9/11, I was in Oregon, and it basically said everybody was like, okay, well, now we're going to be invaded in the coast. Found out for the very first time that the Oregon coast was guarded by a single ranger. The entire coast, that's like a third of America's western coast, was manned by one guy. If terrorists had, come in landing craft, or they could have just turned up and it could have done fuck all. You think, oh, Coast Guard's out there and stuff. No, they got one freaking ship, and it's decommissioned and fucking old. It's like people don't realize that governments don't spend money on disaster preparedness because nobody can see it, and they all believe it's all been done. So you see it with the pandemic. There was no preparation whatsoever. We know pandemics are coming. Where was all the PPE? The guys had nothing.
Can I wind you back? Can I wind you back for a minute to what you were talking about, some of the Somalia and some of the other countries there where people would probably fare better. I think it was in a talk that Dmitry Orlov did, where he was comparing the USA and the former Soviet Union, and explaining why, because he has lived. I think he spent his younger life in the Soviet Union before he came to America, and he's experienced both societies, and he goes backwards and forwards even now. But what he was trying to describe was, he said that in this condition of the collapse, civilizational collapse, explaining why people in the USA would fare so much worse than in his example in the Soviet Union. They've had, and he went through several things. I wish I could remember the full list, but he said it was just simple things like that communism had sort of taught people to somehow or another, not be so individualistic, that they got along with each other a little bit better. And so that means that post collapse, they had a kind of a communal connection that would be very hard to, re-establish in a place like the States where everybody's terribly independent. And he went on to other things like the fact that a lot of people were more accustomed to living in a rural area where they had a little bit of scope to make food. The fact that they were used to not having such readily disposable consumer goods, so they were accustomed to repairing things and making do. And he went through a whole long list of little things like that, explaining why you know, just in that example, explaining why people in places like Russia would probably do a lot better after a collapse than people in the United States would,
Yeah.
just as a general observation, you know.
Yeah,
And
so,
people were just more resilient and hardy back in those days. And nowadays, everyone, I mean, look at Britain. I mean, everybody's just infantilized. Everyone just runs.
yeah, well, this is why I really worry about Britain, because okay, so the basic thing is in a collapse, you don't want, it's like falling off a ledge. You don't want to have a long way to fall. In Africa, you haven't got a long way to fall. In somewhere like New York, you've got a fucking terribly long way to fall. Your lifestyle falling to, you know, kind of African standards is huge. So in America, 3% of the population are involved in agriculture. So you don't know you know zero about how to grow an ear of corn. And you're not going to go out into the fields of Idaho and stuff and reap corn and stuff, because that corn is inedible. Those GMO crops, you cannot take them in your hand and cook them and eat them. They're actually made that way. What they're made to do is to go straight to a factory. The factory breaks them down into about 150 different constituents, and they're inedible because they're made to optimize each one of those 150 processes. And so it's not actually an edible crop in the fields. And Americans don't realize that. Now think in terms of if you're in Africa, there may be 30%, 40% of people involved in agriculture. That means that if you live in a city, you've got a grandma who grows yams in the country. And when the things go to shit in the city, you go to your one of 3 or 4 potential options you have where they go, you know, we told you not to go to the city. Now look. So anyway, have a yam.
But Gary, you're right.
You're not going to do that.
You are right, Gary. I remember the list of Dmitry Orlov because I read that several years ago. And I think I will, if you agree, I will try to contact him and see would he be willing to have a chat.
Yeah, I remember he did that. Somebody was interviewing him, and he went over some of those points in one of the talks. And I wish I remembered more of it because it was remarkable. Just especially given the sort of prevailing opinion that people in the former Soviet Union still aren't doing very well, and all the rest of it. But he said, you know, once the situation changes, the tables will be turned, and the difference will all be the other way. They'll be the ones who are on top and in front, you know.
So anyway, I was busy here. So I'll give you another example. So go and have a look at Tesco on all the food that's on a shelf. You'll see a lot of it's packaged in glass. Now, the chances that a glass plant carries on going and keeps jarring up, you know, your spaghetti sauce and shit like that is close to zero. So there might be loads of these commodities that they can't ship to you because there are no containers, or there's one ingredient, or they can't get hold of one thing like a preservative or something like that. Then they won't last on the shelf, and that'll break the supply chain. There'll be supply chain shocks. So because they have long supply chains and just-in-time delivery, they're supply shocks. They call them a whip or stuff, and those things can be severe because food can spoil in transit and stuff. And so you can see it now with the vaccines. A lot of the things get spoiled in large batches and stuff like that. But okay, now imagine somebody in Africa. If you go and look at a farm stall, or here in Greece, you go to the grocery here, everything's laid out. They're the beans. it comes from somebody on the island. And then basically the butcher, they have a real butcher. The butcher slaughters the goat and the sheep, and they come from the island. So it's like they're going to be laughing. But if you have it from Tesco's, it might come on a plane from Shanghai.
Oh,
You're fucked because planes are not going to be flying.
Yeah, I mean, like places like London and Birmingham and big cities like that, it'd be a horror show. I mean, it would be absolutely.
But you see, people like Boris Johnson and that should be preparing. They know what's coming. And what are they doing about it? Absolutely fuck all. They're criminals. They are psychopathic criminals. And the average person doesn't know. It's very basic for what they should be, in America, in Utah, in Salt Lake City. They have warehouses and warehouses of food and provisions and stuff like that. They were used in Katrina. What they're done by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons,
the Mormons,
the disaster preparedness, and America relies on that. Nobody does that in the UK. The UK is prepped to starve and die horribly.
Well, the food banks have been bigger and bigger every year, but I mean, yeah, but that relies on mostly donations. I mean, a lot of the supermarkets these days, you can, on your way out, you can donate a tin of beans or whatever for the homeless and stuff. And they did. I mean, it was interesting. A lot of people said, people who were kind of clued in before COVID, they were like, "Oh, that's weird," like how they started doing things in the supermarkets before the lockdown fully started. So clearly the government had been talking to the supermarkets. But yeah, I mean, in London, you go to London, I think even now on the sort of metro-sized supermarket, there's queues still because they won't let so many people in. So they're already, people are already, used to the behavior of, right, you got to get in a queue and you're only allowed so many of this and so many of that. I mean, I think there's not rationing on it now, but there was during the first lockdown and the second lockdown. I think they rationed certain items. But yeah, they're conditioning the people in the cities, I think, to get in line. You're only allowed this or that,
Yeah, but just imagine when the food delivery doesn't come, all those people standing in line and doing their food right. But
I wanted to say
on infrastructure and basically planes and ships coming in, and you can think of a million scenarios, like basically the one that's just happened, where the ships and planes stop. And basically Britain is in the world of hurt. I mean, it's not a question of, they will always come and stuff. Other countries could basically pay more. So in other words, there could be a global crisis, there could be a rice crisis or something like that. And everybody will try and get hold of the ships that are now furloughed. And so then basically a country it'll be like a vaccine war. You will have a food war and a transport war. And a country like China, who has gold and stuff, will completely outspend Britain. The pound will be worth fuck all, and Boris Johnson will be begging for some, container line like Mayos to come and bring food aid for Britain. And they'll say, what do you pay with? Well, we got pounds. Say, well, those are fucking worthless. Can you cough up something worth something? You can't.
It always baffled me. Yeah, totally. It always baffled me how someone like, he was a proper doomer, wasn't he, in his time, that James Lovelock. And yet he always said, I think Britain will be a lifeboat. It was like, I never really bought that either. I think because he was from the war, he was a scientist during the war and he remembers those times. Maybe he was just too old to sort of realize what modern just-in-time delivery system, how we're just so reliant on that now. It's just crazy. There is a lot of local food farmers and farm shops and things when you get in the countryside, but but
get 10 million people in Britain, and it's like how many people can get out to the countryside? And anyway, they would start resisting, right? I don't think they would put up with people coming from London to invade their strawberries. Right?
So anyway, I think we should stop because Tom is going to need some emergency aid exercises now. Stop about the UK.
Well, get on a fucking bicycle and come to Greece.
Yeah. Ireland.
I'm gonna get out.
I was reading something about, I don't know if it's a conspiracy thing, but they said that there's a big shortage of lorry drivers, and that's causing the delay in the deliveries to supermarkets in the UK. So it's being predicted that it will worsen in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that actually. That's a new one on me. There's just so much news these days. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. The supply chains are all messed up. Yeah, you can't get anything, like lots of things, like consumer goods and everything, like plastics and all sorts of stuff. There's things that aren't, if you go to a shop and you ask about things, I know that for sure. I think that's across the board. But yeah, so it's only a matter of time, as you say, that there'll be other shortages. I had noticed a few things on the supermarket shelves as well, which aren't there anymore. Nothing major, but yeah.
That's Brexit. I think that's a lot to do with Brexit, because I've seen it in Ireland too, where we were relying on English supplies, certain things, and there was a lapse. There's still a lapse, but now they're turning to France, Italy, Germany much more for their supplies. But we're not an industrialized country here. There's hardly no industry, and there's an enormous percentage of rural people. But for food, I noticed, like you, in the supermarket, there was some moments there's some things that are not, but I think it's Brexit related more than anything else.
Probably. Yeah, before I forget, someone else to think about would be that former diplomat, Khan Ross, the reluctant anarchist, the guy that was doing state building.
He's a cool guy. Yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah.
Interesting guy.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. But one more thing that I want to say about it is worth being nuanced about it, because there are upsides as well in collapse, and people need to know and the youth needs to know and think about that, to think about it realistically. So, for example, if there was food shortages in Britain, the nutrition would get a hell of a lot better. There would be fewer people clogging the NHS trying to get wheelchairs because they have premature diabetes. So basically, the best thing that could happen in the UK is a big food shortage, and I don't think people know that. Up to a certain point, basically, Britain can make half its food, but it would actually serve Britain quite well to halve its food intake. But people don't know that.
Totally agree with what you say. I've often thought of that, and I'm observing. You know, I grew up in a country where food is like a religion. You know, France, where people, have a lot of products and a lot of variety of things. But my mother was English, and I saw the difference. I was going back and over to the two countries, and I saw how things evolved through the years in terms of nutrition and how people were feeding themselves and what was happening. Because on both sides of my family, there was doctors too, in the UK and in France. And I was listening to their stories about the emergence of diabetes type 2 and things like that. And it is so obvious that what we think is a normal diet and what is a normal meal and what is even, is totally crazy. And I think that in collapse, suddenly you're going to realize that you can live on much less than you think, that you don't, there's about, I could say 80% of what you're eating is just not necessary. It's cultural. I've seen that in France because, lots of the decorum in the meals were about, I'm not denying that it's a fantastic cuisine and everything, but it's just, I heard stories from my family during the war, because my parents, my father and grandmother lived during the German occupation, and they knew what it was to have tickets and rations. And I heard all those stories because I was only born 10 years after the end of the World War II. So I know what they were living on. I heard about nettle soups before they were fad in the new age kind of thing. I heard about foraging because they had to. And I also saw the health and the strength of the people of that generation starting to degrade immensely as soon as food started to flow again. So, I think you're absolutely right. Collapse has got lots of good sides. Lots.
Yeah, it has. But people need to explore them, and you can do it if you study what happened in Sarajevo and stuff. But I'm in a lot of ways, I'm sorry this COVID thing hasn't been worse, because if few people died, but there was more social disruption, people would start to build social networks, and all the social networks have broken down in the UK. For example, you just send Gran to a home and stuff, and it's like, a home's a commercial organization. A financial collapse might make a lot of homes, because people have all their all their savings in pensions and stuff like that in the UK in 401ks. Now they in the UK, I mean in the US, they're all based on the stock market. If there's a major financial collapse, all these old people won't have a bean. That means all those for-profit healthcare places close. They don't run on air. So what it means is Gran's going to have to come home. She's going to have to come home to some little woke twerp that's self-obsessed and works in the city. And it's like, well, first that's going to go is your metrosexual little hipster life is going to go down the toilet because you're going to have to look after Gran when she's got Alzheimer's. So wake up, arseholes. That's, if you want to be woke, think no more coffees at home looking after the old folks like you should have been, you fucking self-obsessed little shits. And, Alan should be going and saying that to people and shocking them because they need to be shocked. They need to be shocked out of this delusion that they're in. And so, but what they'll find is their life will improve if they get out of the coffee shop and fucking eat their Apple iPhone and go home and look after Gran. Their lives will actually improve.
Yeah, that's a good point. It needs to be, you need to shock them, but then give them the good news about how the story could be, post that, or just to highlight where we're at. Like, that's exactly it. Like, in the UK, it's terrible.
Mixed.
Like,
It's mixed blessings, but you get what you fight for.
Yeah.
None of this shit's going to be handed on a plate. And all the part of the depression and the psychological collapse that the youth is they're just giving up. Part of that is a kind of a selfishness. So if they know that it's a mixed person and a helplessness because they don't know how to do anything for themselves. So the fact that if things are bleak, they don't know how to change that. So you can encourage them to say that it's a mixed bag, but you definitely only get what you fight for. So you better start. This whole thing where it's like, oh, we can't have a techno society, so we're fucked. And it's like, no, between there and there is your entire life. There's meaning, existence. Most people live their life in the zone that you dread.
Yes, because think of how long all this technological gadgets have been around. Like you said, even electricity, even cars, refrigeration. That's probably just in the last century or so. So our elders lived lives of, like however they lived their lives without all these technological improvements. And also, may I say that I used to, follow Dmitry Orlov and the other peak oil bloggers, so I'm familiar with what he said. There was another blogger too, and she was in favor of, like being resilient in the sense of gardening, trying to feed yourself. And she said too that before collapse, one must prepare oneself to already accept that I will have to eat this vegetables or these potato or whatever, train the children to do that, which kind of reminds me of what Lord Hugh has been saying all along. Learn to let go, like in your mind, let go that, I will not be having this lattes or this avocado toasts, and get your palate used to eating whatever's natural, vegetables, whatever grows from the ground.
It worries me that kind of adaptation, and that is because what I see people doing is they're developing this, what they think they developing a resilience and stuff like that. So then they start doing, victory gardens and stuff, and they're convincing themselves that kind of prepping means that they have an edge and they can survive and stuff. But I think it's a very dangerous mindset to get into. The proper mindset to get into is say you cannot really tell how it goes down. What's dangerous about that thing is where everybody says, oh, we're all doomed, let's do permaculture, is you got to be very, very fucking careful. Because you start doing permaculture and it becomes a delusion. where you're going down to the local food store to get your fertilizer and shit, and all that shit's not going to be there. It was just exactly the thing that we said, I was trying to get to with Kevin. You remember when he said that, oh, you know, there's a little old lady with a garden just down there, and I said, you know,
I see. Yeah.
gardens are magic, and they just magical little squares where, you know, things pop out of to eat. And I said, like, oh, really? So where does she get her fertilizer? Oh, from rice husks. Yeah. Where are you going to get fucking rice husks in a famine, idiot? Oh, you mean I won't be doing little fucking vegetable gardens? No, not if you're feeding them off rice husks. So basically, don't assume that you can get a garden going in a little urban setting that basically is self-sustaining if there's famine. Imagine all the garden shops are closed and shit. It doesn't work that way.
A little remark from a gardener: permaculture doesn't rely on fertilizer. That's the thing.
Okay, but you know what I mean.
It's
regenerative.
It's regenerative.
Okay,
It's maybe organic. You meant organic. It can be
organic. Okay, but permaculture, you're not out of the woods. You see, basically, it's plants need food, and so basically, you still basically need some nutrients. You can't just go on forever without basically having some input.
If you plant perennials and if you don't plant with the idea of having a surplus and you use nature and you forage, you can have something that is regenerative constantly. If you get used to, as you were saying earlier, that to do with what you have, and to have your palate a bit used to things that might not be familiar. There is possibilities if the climate doesn't degrade too fast in areas where you live to have
I know it's possible, but what I'm talking against is the delusion. So basically, you know, people that have like a market garden in Battersea, they have a communal garden in Battersea, and then they think, oh, well, they're okay for the famine. No. I know some kids in Battersea that'll have your tomatoes away long before you get hold of them, Grandma. So it's basically, you know, it's just not realistic. And you see, I feel that they're causing themselves unnecessary pain and not getting into the right mindset. The real mindset you should be in is you just don't really know. No one really knows how it goes down. So you can find out about other people's experiences, and you can guess what it's going to be like in Britain. But on the whole, it's better to be grounded and realistic and know when you're heading for a lot of stuff. You don't want to be having hope. There are too many people that think they're out of the system and having hope in them. It's like, don't delude yourselves. The system will come and find you, especially in collapse.
It's one of those problems with all the libertarians, like you were talking about earlier, like Mike Maloney and all the gold bugs and the Austrian people, and they keep talking about, oh, you know, having a bit of food and having a bit extra and stuff. I mean, most of them aren't talking about, you know, building a bunker and having a load of guns and stuff, but they're still, I mean, Mike Maloney particularly is on about, I bought some land and I got my Tesla batteries, and over in, where is he? He's in Puerto Rico or somewhere. You're like, oh, Jesus. But he's, yeah. So they're sort of like, yeah, we're going to ride it out. They're going to have their little bit of paradise, and everything will be going to shit around.
They might though. They might though. You see, I mean, if you have lots of gold and silver on your own island, I would say you're going to do pretty fucking well. I think you could outlast a lot of people.
And vodka, supposedly, because it can be traded.
Yeah, but you have to be aware of the pirates. Don't go claim some gold and pirate. I can't understand all these people shouting with my silver, my gold, and advertising it everywhere and stuff. They don't realize that in collapse you're going to see much more of the black flag going up, you know, in the skull and bones. They don't realize that, you know.
But they can survive some scenarios like that with gold. So, for example, if you're in Venezuela and you had a whole pots of gold and silver, you would own the whole country now. So it's like there was some guy, I didn't meet him, but a friend of mine met him. Went down there just after it. And he was a businessman, and he was forward thinking. And he went and bought a whole lot of railway ties, basically railway, what do you call them? Sleepers.
Track?
No, not
Sleepers.
sleepers. Tracks.
Sleepers.
Yeah, when he bought a whole lot of railway tracks because they were iron. So he filled his back garden with, 2 stories of just iron. And that was extremely good investment. It went up, thousands and thousands of %. So if you're stacking silver or something, you want to keep it quiet. You don't want the whole neighborhood. Basically, I think one of these things is these gold bugs go around saying, "No, I'm in the gold and silver," and they're telling all their friends, and it's like not a good idea. keep still. But but you can survive some scenarios like that pretty well. So, and you got a lot of hiccups. But the general failing of that mindset is the guys don't. They're not prepped for a long haul, 20 years like that. So that kind of thing, not many people are set up to last 20 years. So, well, that's a good thing to end on, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's getting late. Okay.
All right. Well, should we just pause quickly on the way up?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Full still. Bring your attention behind your eyes. Become aware of your senses and rest. Om Paramatma Namah. Well, hopefully there's no collapse this week.
See you. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're recording?
Yeah, I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.